Donald Trump told the American public during the campaign that he was going to turn the Department of Justice into a political operation, an arm of the White House to destroy his political opponents, right? He said that the greatest threat to America is the enemy within, and who he said was the enemy within was us, was journalists, were his political opponents. Kash Patel's only qualification is because he agrees with Donald Trump that the Department of Justice should serve to punish, lock up, and intimidate Donald Trump's political opponents.
Hi again, everyone. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. In order to make good on that campaign promise of retribution, Trump is making sure he will have the right people in place in his cabinet, as well as across the rest of the federal government, people who will carry out what the senator's talking about there, that quest for retribution and revenge. So even though Trump's own hand-picked choice to lead the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Christopher Wray, is only 7 years into his 10-year term, Trump this weekend broadcast his intention to replace him with someone else, someone who will follow through with Trump's goal, stated as it is, of weaponizing the Department of Justice for his own purposes. Enter a man named Kash Patel. Listen to how closely aligned he is with Trump.
As we clean up our Capitol, we'll clean up and clean out our deep state.
I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state.
Those J6 warriors, they were warriors, but they were really more than anything else. They're victims of what happened.
It's a political narrative, and it's tough to defeat. It sounds pretty lethal, you know, storming of this, hijacking of that, insurrection. But when you look at some of the people involved, their lives have been destroyed by the Justice Department.
To get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news. And I don't mind that so much.
We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out. But yeah, we're putting you all on notice.
So that guy, Kash Patel, here's his backstory. He was a former congressional aide for Devin Nunes. Remember him? He was the primary author of the Nunes memo, which accused the FBI and the Department of Justice and their officials of bias in the Russia investigation, something that was never found in multiple audits. He's the author of a children's book. This is my favorite thing about him. The book is called The Plot Against the King. It tells the story of Kash, a wizard, who works to save King Donald from the evil doings of Hillary Clinton and a shifty knight. So subtle. Patel was also the person Donald Trump wanted to install as the CIA deputy director in the waning days of his last administration, although then CIA Director Gina Haspel threatened to quit if he did that. Trump's choice of Kash Patel shows, though, that things are much different now. As Axios reports, quote, Trump advisors are running out of words to describe what's coming in January. They say he feels empowered, emboldened, vindicated, validated, eager to stretch the boundaries of power. He's egged on by Musk and others in picking trusted brawlers for the toughest, most controversial tasks. Writing in The Atlantic, David Frum exposes the constitutional crisis Trump will unleash. Quote, FBI directors wield awesome powers over the liberties of Americans. The unwritten rule governing their appointment, no dismissal except for compelling cause, bulwarked American law and freedom for half of a century. Even first-term Trump dared not openly defy it. But second-term Trump is opening with a bid to junk it altogether. Much of the reporting on Trump's announcement reveals a society already bending to Trump's will, something that was regarded as outrageously unacceptable in 2017. Treating an FBI director as just another Trump aide has been semi-normalized even before President-elect Trump takes office. Trump's choice to lead the FBI is where we begin the hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. former assistant director of counterintelligence at the FBI. MSNBC national security analyst Frank Figliuzzi is here. Also joining us, senior national political correspondent for the Washington Post, MSNBC political analyst Ashley Parker is here. With me at the table, law professor at Hofstra University, former attorney at the Brennan Center for Justice's Democracy Program, James Samples here, and former acting assistant attorney general for national security at the Justice Department, MSNBC legal analyst Mary McCord is here. Mary, I want to start with you because Kash Patel's rise in Trump world is really on the back of Trump's fear and anger about his campaign being scrutinized initially for either wittingly or unwittingly working in concert with the Russians. Collusion, not an actual crime he was investigated for, but whether his campaign and Russia having a shared mission of his election in 2016 was a national security risk and whether crimes were committed. That was sort of the origin story of Trump's retribution, which would shape his entire presidency, his 4 years in exile, and his entire campaign for re-election. It seems like a price has been paid by the men and women of the FBI and the Department of Justice that hasn't been paid as of yet by anyone else for 8 years of being smeared as part of a deep state. What is morale like inside the department 8 years in?
Well, I think, with Trump's reelection and in particular with some of the early announcements about appointments, first Matt Gaetz, which, has been pulled back, of course, in favor of Pam Bondi. Now this announcement about Kash Patel. People are very worried. They're very concerned. There are some that weathered Trump 1.0. And they're seeing this looking like it's going to be very different because there's not even an effort to sort of install people in positions at the head of the Department of Justice, at the head of the FBI, as the director of national intelligence, right, and other high-level positions in our intelligence community. Doesn't seem to be an effort to put serious people with the right experience in those positions. Instead, in those places where I think are the three areas where I think Trump felt most betrayed during his first administration, he is installing the loyalists. And I think that people within the department, and I'm certainly hearing from people within the department and the FBI, are worried they are going to be asked to be part of this retribution campaign. And that's very worrisome. It's one thing to make it through Trump 1.0, but to have to do 4 more years and potentially be involved in more nefarious things and potentially having to really push back on those things and maybe be fired. I mean, that's just a lot to ask of career public servants who've worked under Republicans, they've worked under Democrats, they've worked under Trump. That's a lot to ask to go through that. I do think there will be pushback. I do think, a core group, and hopefully most will stay and try to push back against the worst excesses. Again, to do an investigation, you need some basis to investigate. And I think the tell was what Kash said in that clip, which is, we don't, criminally or civilly, we don't know yet. We'll figure that out. Well, that's just not how it works, right? Whether you're talking about a criminal investigation and probable cause required for an indictment, proof beyond a reasonable doubt required to actually bring charges, or whether you're talking about a civil matter where you need to have a cause of action, you need to have a statutory or constitutional basis to bring a lawsuit. Those are constitutional requirements, and his cavalier attitude toward those, as though it doesn't matter, we're going after you, we'll figure out what technique we're going to use. That's what makes people within the department and the FBI worried about what they might get asked to do.
So when you were leading the National Security Division, how often did you meet with the FBI director?
Almost every day, but certainly we had 3 early morning briefings a week over at the FBI, and then I would often see him as well over at the White House for other meetings of the national security staff, at the level below the president and the meetings the president himself convened.
And that was Comey and then Wray, right? Were the two?
Well, I left before Wray was actually confirmed. I stayed past Comey being fired, but then there was a series of actings, as you may recall. Andy McCabe before Chris Wray was nominated and confirmed. And the interesting thing is, so here we're talking about, FBI directors are appointed for 10-year terms. This is a post-Watergate reform that was very purposeful to make sure they would extend and through multiple presidencies. Yet, you know, Mr. Trump, his first term, fired James Comey and has already announced he's going to fire his own appointee, Christopher Wray. Now, the first term, you may recall, it was widely, I think, believed that the reason for firing James Comey was because of the Russia investigation. The investigation you mentioned was the initial cause of all the grievances that Kash Patel, I think, has now latched on as his grievances, too. But then there was an effort to sort of paper over that with a memo that the Deputy Attorney General wrote, actually talking about when James Comey came out during the campaign in the summer and made public statements about why Hillary Clinton was not, you know, he was not recommending charges for Hillary Clinton. This was him overstepping what the FBI director should do. That is a Department of Justice decision about prosecution. And so it was papered over as the cause for his firing was about what he had done during the campaign. And the reason I raise that, because even at that time, even Donald Trump or his advisors recognized there should be some cause before you fire the FBI director. I don't really see that in what is being discussed by Donald Trump now. I mean, his cause would be he's been the victim of witch hunts for another 4 years after the first 4